Good evening and welcome to the most compelling talk show on TV, The Desk on Global Television. My name is Anthony Momodu. Welcome to today's edition as the European Union has reiterated its commitment to supporting democratic governance in Nigeria and the West African sub-region. That's how I make you welcome to today's edition of the program, The Desk on Global Television. And we'll be looking at a very interesting talking point, talking about the Independent National Electoral Commission being able to deliver in the 2023 general elections, and lots more needs to be done, says the European Union. We'll also be looking at what's happening currently in Africa's biggest black nation, Nigeria, where it's a total shutdown and blackout across the country. We'll be looking at the implication of the shutdown by the National Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria as it affects the whole entire nation in terms of light out. We'll be looking at what the implication means for the country, Africa's biggest black nation. We'll also be looking at other talking points regards things playing out in Nigeria, as also we'll be taking our searchlight to South Africa, where South Africa's ruling African National Congress has lost its 30-year grip on the outright majority in the parliament. According to official results announced on Sunday, the NLC secured only 159 seats in the 400-seat National Assembly, garnering just 40% of the vote. So we'll be looking at what's happened to ANC and also Jacob Zuma's party, MK, securing just 14.59% of votes. So we'll be looking at what Cyril Ramaphosa will have to do to get ANC back on track. All right, that's talking about in the African. We'll also be looking at the U.S., where it's the Trump gate that is on the news this evening, as Donald Trump has suggested that sending him to prison could prove a breaking point for his supporters, a warning that will fuel concerns of political violence around the United States of America, and also remembering very well that it did cause some bit of violence when Trump lost the last election. So we'll be looking at the U.S. in close perspective, what's going to pan out with Trump already making comments that looks to incite his supporters ahead of him likely to be sent to prison. All right, we'll be looking at that closely. And also we'll be looking at other interesting talking points as, like I told you earlier, blackout across Nigeria as workers goes on strike. We've got almost 5 or 7 different unions joining the NLC and TUC to ensure that the strike action is felt across the board. That's not forgetting the fact that lawmakers and governors try to meet with the organized labor to see how they could stop the strike, but that didn't work out. We'll also be taking you to other interesting talking points across board as the health sector is also joining. Also, we've got the debt burden as apprehension hits everywhere as government borrows 20.1 trillion naira under the Tinubu administration. Yes, the federal government borrowed 20.1 trillion naira from domestic investors in the first year of President Tinubu's administration, representing year-on-year increase of 117% from the previous year. So we're looking at the implication of that borrowing from the local investors. A very disturbing occurrence there we'll be looking at. Okay, these and other talking points is what we look at on today's edition of the program. The desk, I'll be joined via Zoom by Mohammed Bello, who is a veteran journalist, hopefully all the way from Sokoto. He will be joining us. And also we'll be having live in the studios Farouk Aka Olisa, who is the head of media and public affairs of Fulcrum Limited. These and other guests hopefully will be joining us via Zoom as we look at this very interesting talking point. That will be after this break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back from that break. You're on to the finest show, most compelling talk show on TV, talking about the desk on Global Television. And we're in with a shout and ready to press the talking buttons as we do analysis of very important stories making the rounds around the globe and in the African continent. Let's begin from Europe, where the European Union has reiterated its commitment to supporting democratic governance in Nigeria and in the West African sub-region. It noted that while the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, was able to deliver the 2023 general elections, a lot still needed to be done to improve Nigeria's electoral process. According to a statement released by the Commission, the European Union's ambassador to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Samuela Isopi, said this in Abuja during the inaugurating steering committee meeting of the European Union support to democratic governance in Nigerian program, while urging stakeholders to increase efforts towards strengthening democratic governance in the country. She lauded the critical and essential support provided by the European Union and the SDGN cohort during the elections. Ambassador Isopi explained that EU considers supporting democracy at home and outside its borders and working with partners to strengthen democracy worldwide. In the remark, INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu expressed worries concerning the high number of court cases challenging the conduct of primaries by political parties. He revealed that while many politicians file their cases in court, about 70 to 80% of them end up being withdrawn either before trial, before the commencement of trial, or soon afterwards. The artist stressed a waste time and resources of the Commission. Let's look at what the EU is saying a lot still needs to be done in terms of the process, and also INEC on their own part complaining that 70 to 80% of cases are filed by political parties. Is that not an admission to the fact that we lack internal democracy by political parties? And on the flip side, also the fact that INEC is yet to deliver the goods in terms of free, fair and credible elections in Nigeria and the sub-Saharan region.
Okay, thank you for that, and thanks for having me today again, Mr. Mamu. It's my pleasure. Looking at this, you will understand that the INEC has been like on a hot seat as long as Nigerians are concerned. You know, from the aftermath of 2023 election that produced President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the president of the country. Okay, so what it means by implication is that if we have about 70 to 80 court, filings after the election, people saying that they do not agree with the result, it means there are some challenges that need to be addressed. There are some gaps that need to be filled. Even though the INEC themselves has been on a defensive side, that all these people filing court cases do not have grounds to do so because they believe they have conducted free, fair, and credible election. But then, if you look at the dynamics that played out during this election, the issue that has to do with biometric systems, that INEC claims that there were some of the systems malfunctioned and they could not get accuracy. Okay, so when we are beginning to transition from conventional polling system to this technology-based electoral processes, I think that INEC themselves need to invest more in their technology capacity so that we do not have that kind of issues where they will be saying they have these technical errors or technical malfunction of their system. So it leaves a lot of doubts on the minds of many Nigerians on whether this election is actually free and fair as INEC has claimed.
All right, for the EU, do you think the EU has done enough in terms of speaking truth to power, especially when electoral bodies like INEC have faulted in some areas in terms of electoral materials, getting to certain units in good time, and also the issue of the fact that INEC has consistently been accused of having some political parties or candidates, or especially the ruling party, having an advantage of having already thumb-printed poll sheets already, even result sheets, even before the elections are over.
Yes, the European Union, we believe that they still need more to be done from their part, since some of these emerging democracies like Nigeria and some other African countries are actually looking up to them. We talk about European nations, the United States of America, that we believe they are now matured in their democratic policies. Okay, so there is this more emphasis should be laid on how the European Union can continuously advise our local government, our national government here on how they can get it right. Because if you look at the way the things are going, it seems the election in Nigeria is more like, do or die affair, and it's not conform with the ethical principles of democracy that, elections need to be, you going to express yourself.
Do you think the European Union, not to cut you short, but do you think the European Union is being sincere in terms of helping us with technology to ensure that there's transparency in the electoral process? Or they are more like, if a government that seems to favor their policies, they are good with it, they do not come out guns blazing to say this elections was totally flawed here and here, but as long as they know that that's government that comes into power is going to do their bidding, they're fine with it.
Of course, we can always have this kind of suspicion that some kind of foreign powers are becoming like a determinant, of our local elections here, or they have influence over our the outcomes of our local elections. But then, even those suspicions has been there for a very long time, but we do not want to sit back and say, okay, this is, the reality on ground, and therefore we as a nation should sit back. And so it still boils down to how much the government of Nigeria, the leadership of government of Nigeria, are willing to embrace democracy in all its forms and willing to apply the principles. Whether the support of the EU are there or not, we should be able to live up to the expectation as a people, knowing fully well that whatever we are doing is, is geared towards making our country a better place and having a better outcome for one and all. So the question whether the EU are supplying us with enough manpower or enough, technology shouldn't be there, because whatever we want, we go for it. So if we have that capacity as a nation to determine what we want to see, then it can actually, inform our approach towards being proactive about getting a right result.
Okay, in the meeting of the EU and INEC, the agreement is the fact that internal democracy is missing in our political parties. Why is it impossible for Nigerian political parties, including the ruling APC, to adhere to internal democracy? Why is it impossible for them to practice what they preach?
Yeah, because, politics, if you can put it this way, is like a juicy occupation for some politicians. Okay, so these politicians, so to speak, cannot stop at nothing to ensure that they actually, get involved in all the time, winning the elections and taking that leadership positions. But then it shouldn't be a do or die affair, because in a democracy where things work, the credible candidate should be raised or should be emerged out of the willingness of the people, not out of people forcing themselves into power. So when you have people actually made up their mind that they must go there, it is their turn.
But can't we blame INEC also? Because INEC usually would witness or observe this, primaries where the problem usually starts from. Why is it that INEC cannot have mechanism to say, okay, these elections or these primaries was truly false, and so this candidate that emerged is void?
Yeah, of course, on the part of INEC, INEC is like a symbol of that should represent, truth and transparency, protecting the overall interest of the people. So INEC at the helm of affairs when it comes to electoral processes in Nigeria are expected, to be just. Okay, so it still goes down to the leadership capacity, because if, let's say, the president of a country, see the need why this electoral process should be free and fair, he should also put the mechanisms to put INEC in check themselves, to be able to deliver the right justice, as long as the issues that has to do with Nigerian elections is concerned.
All right, let's move on. And my guest is not a person but Farouk Akaolisa, who is the head media public affairs of Focus Publishment right here in the Federal Capital Territory. And we're looking at a key talking point. Let's move on to the next talking point as we come back to the African continent with 54 countries. We're now picking on South Africa. That's where our focus is this evening, as South Africa's ruling African National Congress has lost its 30-year grip on an outright majority in the parliament. According to official results announced on Sunday, the ANC secured 159 seats in the 400-seat National Assembly, gathering 40% of the vote, which is the lowest so far. The center-right Democratic Alliance followed with 87 seats, and amounting to 22% of the vote. In surprising third place was the newly formed MK party of former President Jacob Zuma, which captured 14.59% of the vote and 58 seats, according to AFP. President Cyril Ramaphosa and leaders from most rival parties attended the result announcement, except for Zuma, who denounced the election as rigged and refused to participate. All right, let's look at this is very, very unusual. 30 years of grip of ANC, and we know ANC was built by Nelson Mandela when he emerged the first black president of South Africa. What do you think is playing out in South Africa now that the ANC has lost grip of its 30-year grip, and now they are technically will be forced to either form a coalition government, or as good as it may be, may lose out completely in terms of the number of seats. They've got barely out of 400 seats. They have gotten enough.
The political system, as we know it around the world, is not static. Okay, you can always expect things like this. Even in Nigeria here, we know how many years was the PDP regime until the APC came and took over power. So on a long time, you will expect that there will be a kind of a reshufflement in the system where people are beginning to take up, leadership positions from different political parties altogether. So if ANC has a long-standing history on leadership in South Africa, and at this point, the turnout of the elections has favored the other party, I think it's something that they should be able to accept it and be able to find a way forward for their own party.
Would you say it's because of the litany of corruption cases against each of the former president, Jacob Zuma, that probably has made the ANC lose its credibility and support by South Africans?
Yeah, it could also be a contributory factor, because in recent times there's a whole lot of consciousness around the masses actually taking it upon themselves to stand up for what is right. Africa, there is this awareness on political governance and effective leadership. So any leaders that has found wanting on any issues that has to do with corruption and lack of transparency in governance, of course the people have the right to make the right choices by themselves. So if the previous regime has found accountable on some of these accusations, of course you can never expect the less. Of course the people will definitely look for a way forward to make their country a better place.
All right, let's move on from South Africa and see where we're moving next. But it remains to be seen what Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC would do to change the tides for their party. 30 years of grip of power gradually being lost there, getting just 100+ seats out of 400 seats in the parliament. Let's take it to the U.S. Before we come back to Nigeria, where former President Donald Trump has suggested that sending him to prison could prove a breaking point for his supporters, a warning that could fuel concerns of political violence across the United States presidential election November 5th. In an interview aired Sunday on Fox News, the former president and current Republican White House hopeful acknowledged the possibility of a jail term in time or house arrest following his historic criminal conviction in a hush money trial. The warning will resonate in the country already concerned about the prospect of a civil unrest and political harassment in the run-up to the November elections. We did see this when Trump was losing, the elections last, where his supporters, went into the White House and there was a gunshot and all that. Now he's saying if he's sent to jail, there's a possibility his supporters might cause some mayhem. Is this doing him good or more harm? Already we know when he was convicted recently, he had a lot of sympathy votes, donations coming in, where about $21 million was, gotten via online donations by even new supporters. With this threat he's already making out, is this going to help him in the fact that when the jury meets in July to pass a judgment?
Well, to me, I don't think that threat is enough to boycott whatever court judgment that's going to be emitted in his favor or against him, because America, being the largest democracy, so to speak, in the world, and the whole world is watching. And if the personality of Donald Trump, being the former leader of the United States of America, is being wanting for some of the criminal charges levied against him, just like I said, the whole world is watching the outcome of this case. And I don't think Donald Trump making these kind of threats that there'll be inciting violence. Yes, of course, we agree. He has a lot of supporters, people, he has followers that will always want the best for him. But he's actually very, very far from the reality on ground, because we are talking about a political system here that America needs to set a pace and stuff like what's this?
A role model.
A role model for other countries to emulate. So I think we are watching how the things unfold, and we believe that democratic processes must be duly followed, and the court system, at the end of the day, we'll see how it goes.
But looking at what he has said, it might cause political mayhem. Do you think this is, was he ill-advised to make that comment?
Yes, I can say, if Trump, we know him, is someone who actually says things with actually taking a look at the implications. There was a time he was banned on Twitter because of Twitter
some comments,
comments and all this thing. But I don't think, as a leader, he needs to take this kind of position, because at the end of the day, just like I said, Americans are at the forefront of this, democracy, and they should lead by example. And Donald Trump, in his own personality, of course, should be able to know that meeting out such threats will not actually boycott justice.
But for his party, does this how bad image does he give the Republican Party when Trump makes this assertion? And shouldn't this be concerning to the Republicans?
Yeah, they should, because on the long term, it also has to, that kind of assertion will also determine how much people begin to look at how much integrity people have on trust and integrity people have on the Republican Party. And if one of the foremost leaders of the party is actually behaving this way, of course, it should be a turn of concern to them. All
right, let's leave the U.S. and move on. From the U.S., let's see what's going to happen for July 11, when the conviction will be made, or the judgment will be passed on Trump, whether he's going to go to jail or not. Time will eventually tell. But let's move on to the next talking point. Let's come back to Africa's biggest black nation, Nigeria, where it is the transmission company of Nigeria, TCN, says its workers' union has shut down the national grid, resulting in a nationwide blackout. The TCN General Manager, Public Affairs, Ndidi Mba, disclosed this in a statement Monday. Mba said the national grid shutdown occurred at 2:19 a.m. on Monday. She said at about 1:15 a.m., the Benin transmission operation under the Independent Systems Operation Unit of the TCN reported that all operators were driven away from the control room. She said workers who resisted were beaten up, while some were wounded in the course of forcing them out of the control room. The operations of the Benin Area Control Center were thus brought to zero. All right. We've seen those in the aviation sector, we've seen those in the health sector, we've seen workers in the education sector, and also other transport sector join the strike action. We've seen Nigeria practically on a shutdown, but the TCN tells us that they have tried to recover some of this power through some other means, other substations to give light, but the nation obviously is in a shutdown mode. Who do we blame exclusively for what is happening right now? Do we blame the NLC and TUC, or the government who failed to reach an agreement within the time frame the organized labor gave to them, which was the month of May?
Look, I think, excuse me, first of all, the blame should go to a system that has never worked in Nigeria, because if our system is working, I don't think there will be a need for this industrial action as have been undertaken by the Nigerian Labour Congress, and so it's all about a system that has never worked, because right now Nigerians, following the recent development in the country, where we see people suffering at a mass scale, people suffering in a manner not seen in history, following the removal of fuel subsidy and everything, the cost of living just tripled. So if at this point that the masses have joined the NLC in this industrial action, to go on this strike, it means they are actually demanding for a change. Okay, today NLC is demanding for increase in minimum wage over 400,000, and they have an argument. They have a genuine argument to that because of the current cost of living. All right. So, but then on the long term, we should also look at it from repairing our system, because each and every time the labor wants to go on a strike, you know, there is this there's this always urge for a protest. It doesn't help. It doesn't help because if the political leadership, that the leadership of Nigerian government have actually seen the reason, the need why they should do the needful in order to avert this type of strike from taking place, I think the first thing they should do is to create a system that works for everybody.
Okay, let's look at the back and forth during the negotiation before we go to where we are today. At a point, the federal government projected 57,000 as minimum wage, while the NLC, on the other hand, was named 497,000 naira. And the federal government goes ahead to say, okay, we're giving 60,000 naira, making it that they're adding 3,000 naira to it. That was when Labour felt spiked or felt, insulted by the federal government, saying they're adding just 3,000 naira to 57,000 naira. So Labour says, okay, from 497,000 naira, we're going to leave it at 494 naira, meaning they also removed 3,000. Do you think that was where government missed it, where they began looking at it as if they were insulting the sensibilities of Nigerian workers?
Yeah, I think that negotiation, there's a lot of flaws in that negotiation because that's why they have not been able to come to common terms with the labor as we speak, because the labor, in their own right, they are demanding for something that is going to be better for the Nigerian workforce, right? Because they said that they are not static in their own negotiations, that even though the governments are also looking at the capacity they have in order to absorb such increase, but then they are not saying that they are not willing to negotiate downward. So they're only asking government to take this serious. If you look at the speech made by, or press statement made by the president of the Congress Union, you know, he was saying that, look,
that's Joe Ajaero.
Joe Ajaero. So he was saying that a lot of the meetings that have, you know, the tripartite meeting that was created, that the political stakeholders that are supposed to be in the meeting, they were not there. So they are seeing it on their part that the government are not serious with their negotiations on their own part. So that's why they feel like, okay, the best action for them to do is to incite these industrial actions to go on a strike before they will see if government can take this very serious.
Do you think the government is aware of the magnitude of the losses that is going to face the nation with these strike actions, those in the health sector, pregnant women, those that are marked for surgeries, the fact that there's not going to be power, lots of lives are going to be lost, and also the manpower in the aviation sector, the fintech sector, and manufacturing sectors, all these sectors, aviation at least also. Do you think the government is aware or appreciates the magnitude of the loss of lives and of monies that's going to be lost within this period?
Even the government, I believe, too, they know the consequences of allowing this strike to prevail, because as at yesterday, close to 10 p.m. Last night, we are still expecting that this planned strike should be abolished or should be terminated, because the government, we believe they're having a closed-door conversation with the leadership of NLC. But then the outcome of what we see at the end of the day was that the guys have to proceed with the strike, which means that they have not actually reached a common ground. Now, talking about the implications of this strike on the economic welfare, on the social welfare of the people of Nigeria, of course, is immeasurable. The implication is immeasurable because, as we speak, we have people who cannot access the money in the bank because banks are not working. We have people who are supposed to take care of, people in the critical sector, just like you mentioned, the healthcare, So we already have a problem on ground, and we're now having another problem attached to the one that's already on ground. So it's going to be like worse. So, but then, what do we expect in return? We expect that the government, as a matter of urgency, should be able to call the labor on the table. Look at how they can resolve this issue, because it's for the interest of everybody.
Let's look at, in terms of resolving the conflict, what would be the ideal resolution of this conflict? Getting the federal government to pay the 494,000 naira, or getting the government to reach an agreement where they say, okay, we're going to pay 300,000 naira. And should Labour agree to that? Will it be unreasonable for Labour to agree to call off the strike if those in the education sector, like ASU, who have also joined, do not get their demands answered, and those in the manufacturing sector, if they don't get their demands for funding answered? Do you think which is the best way for the organized labor to ensure that each sector of our national life gets what they have asked from the federal government before this strike action is called off?
I think this time around, the organized labor, they are very much determined to push this. and they have support of a lot of many Nigerians, because the people, just like I said, are going through pains and sufferings in a manner not seen in history at this material time. So the labor union, they are not willing to back down anytime soon unless their demands are met. And the only way their demands are met is for government to give them a reasonable offer, to make Nigerians a reasonable offer. And what do you mean by a reasonable offer? The labor union, they are telling you about the purchasing power parity of our economy, of our currency right now. That you should think of when our minimum wage was 18,000 naira, what was the purchasing power parity of that currency? And then when it was 30,000 naira, what was, so you find out that even 30,000 naira you are paying when the minimum wage was 13,000 naira was even almost equivalent to the 400,000 naira they're asking for now. If you look at it. So this is the argument. They say they have their statistics, they have their data. So they are calling government on the table to look at this thing holistically and say, they are not saying, okay, it's an ultimatum that they are asking for 400, because the reality is that government may not actually have that budget.
Are you sincere? Do you think the government is sincere when they say they don't have that finances, when they paid about 19 million naira or more to the pilgrim board for people to embark on pilgrimage, where they cannot agree to put such money in the health sector, in the education sector? Don't you think the government is losing sense of the right thing to do with the fund, Nigerian fund?
I think we can't say we don't have funds in this country. What we lack is management, because over time history has shown that even when we are unable to manage what we have, we continue to borrow. Okay, yes. Now do you want to go and borrow money to pay minimum wage? The answer is simply no. You just have to create government in recent times.
But will it be out of place if government actually does that? Because the government borrows money for things that are not of use to the Nigerian people, but beneficial to the exclusive.
At this material time, I don't think any person would want to encourage the government to continue borrowing money.
But if that's the only way they can, assuage this strike to stop, would it be out of place?
Well, just like you have said, government has, they have borrowed money a couple of times in the past. Each government has a way of borrowing. But the thing is that,
for things we cannot even, see.
Personally, I would discourage, because there are a lot of revenue opportunities we have in this country. Government in recent times, they created some revenue generation for the government, including the increment in the tariff, electricity tariff, and all these kind of avenues. The government tried to create funding opportunities to run the government. Okay, the argument here is not actually whether we have the money, but the will to do so. Okay, if there is a will, there's always a way. What we are trying to talk is that there should be a compromise, looking at the livelihood of people of Nigeria, because right now the 60,000 naira that the government has proposed, the reality is that it can never take, if you take the cost of transportation alone. So as our FX, our naira is depreciating against the US dollar, is also affecting everything. So these things, they should be able to come up with an immediate or urgent policies that can address some of these economic challenges, so that they can be able to offer the people of Nigeria the best thing they deserve.
But when we talk about 60,000 as national minimum wage, does that give us an idea how, one, insensitive the government is and unaware of what Nigerians are going through? If a government can't say 60,000 is a national minimum wage, does that give us an idea how aloof the government is to the reality on ground?
Yeah, the issue of poor wage is a big deal. Of course, you can say that, in Nigeria or some of the African countries has actually been a victim of poor wage state. Okay, the data are there that we pay relatively less in terms of, our workforce, our labor, everything here. So compared to some other countries. So I think it's also a very good opportunities for the political stakeholders to begin to look at it that, okay, from this angle that, we need to offer our people something reasonable, even if it means us, creating, different, alternatives in order to meet up with that demands. But the truth of the matter is that, looking at the purchasing power of our currency, 60,000 naira cannot take any person anywhere as it is now, because only your transportation alone almost engulf the money.
All right, let's hope things, but in terms of how long this, strike action, the fact that it's been termed indefinite, does that give us an idea how desperate or how serious labor is to ensure that the government, the Bola Tinubu-led government, bends and heeds to their demands? And do you see the government as a government that is willing or might bend to whatever the organized labor is asking for?
Okay, the other time you talked about, does this government really knows what the people are going through?
Yes.
That is the first question, anybody, because if they do, they will see reasons, genuine reasons from what the organized labor, they are demanding for, okay? Because you need to go out on the streets to see what a layman is passing through. Today we're talking about 60,000 naira minimum wage. Okay, we can take away transportation inside this money because they say it encompasses your allowances or whatever you get. Okay, now inside this money, you're expected to pay for your feeding, you're expected to pay for your hospital bills, you're expected to pay for your shelter, right, your accommodation, and other dependency. Because right now, even the dependency ratio in Nigeria is high. A lot of people have lost their job. A lot of companies have shut down. Look, the problems created by the fuel subsidy removal needs to be addressed first. Because since the first subsidy was removed, and we started buying fuel from 170 something naira.
But are we even certain the subsidy has been removed? Because in one breath, at times we hear the government come out to say XY number of amount was paid for subsidy, especially in the electricity sector, where Adebola Adelabu, the minister, once came out to tell us that the government still paid X amount of money in millions, if not billions, for subsidy.
Yeah, I think the only way out is...
Is the government being sincere as regards to the removal of subsidy?
Yeah, you see, from my understanding, it was removed in parts, but not in total. Okay, it was removed in part, but not in total, because after the WHO calculations, they found out that even at the current rate they are bringing in fuel to this country, it's still on the high side, and the marketers or oil marketers are still complaining that it's on the high side for them. So if they should stick on the price of importation of PMS, of course, perhaps we end up buying fuel at the rate of 1,500 naira per liter. So perhaps there are some, conversation going on that government is actually subsidizing, maybe, trying to support the sector in the best way they can. Excuse me, in the best way they can. But of course, on the long term, you can always anticipate that the only way we can find solution to this is restoring our refinery. If Nigerian refinery come on stream.
Okay, that's another truth. The government has not been sincere. They've told us several times the refineries are going to come back. Do you anticipate reversal of the subsidy removal? Could that be a game changer to probably make things right, like probably restating subsidy? Do you think that might change things so that we have reduction in fuel prices and the electricity tariff? Do you think the government might say, okay, now we're reverting to 65 naira, which we used to have for the next probably 1 year, then before we now probably decide if we're going to have an increase? Could that be a game changer for the government to think? Because we've seen the governments do policy somersaults several times again and again. So will it be out of place if government says, okay, if this is going to be the quickest form of turning things around, subsidy come back, electricity tariff revert back to 65%. Is it out of place?
It's not out of place, because if we have put it on a cost-per-cost basis, the implications of not doing so, which is also one of the challenges we as the outcome we're seeing today, this industrial action undertaken by the organized labor. Right? Because if things are actually working out the way it's supposed to be, and there is no issue of this, petroleum crisis and crisis around livelihood, of course, there won't be this call for a large-scale strike. Okay, so it won't be inappropriate if government can actually reverse some of their policies, looking at the livelihood of people and how they can actually ensure that things actually work. But you may not actually expect it comes down to 65 naira.
Why? If Labour insists on the strike action and this goes for a week or more, don't you think the government would have to bend?
The government, of course, we expected that they should do something very fast, but the only way we can begin to see the reduction, even if, do you know that even as we speak now, if our refineries come on stream, we have about 4 refineries, the other time the NNPC said that the Port Harcourt refinery will be coming on stream anytime soon. So let's say we have, out of the 4 refineries we have the Warri, we have the Kaduna, we have the Port Harcourt. Let's say if the Port Harcourt refinery actually come on stream now, of course, if we are able to get the petrol, even if it's 300 naira, 350 naira per liter, based on the royalty on ground, Nigerians will have some ease. Businesses will have a little ease. Do you know that it costs a lot to buy this at the rate of 700 naira currently now? Because now even the power supply is not consistent. So you can imagine what it means running your businesses with generator at that rate. So of course, it increases a lot of burden on businesses and of course, general livelihood of people.
All right, let's hope the needful will be done by the federal government, probably reverse all the ailing policies in terms of subsidy removal and also the hike in electricity tariff. Maybe, just maybe, you might get Labour to want to reverse this indefinite strike action, as we hope for the best, because right now Africa's biggest black nation is on shutdown and blackout. All right, let's go to the next talking points. We are talking apprehension as the federal government borrowed 20.1 trillion naira from domestic investors in the first year of President Tinubu's administration, representing year-on-year increase of 117% from the previous year, prompting concerns over the impact on the economy, including likely additional pressure on inflation, increased debt service costs, and higher borrowing costs from businesses. Analysts noted that the sharp increase in the federal government's borrowing has the potential to compound the historic high inflationary trend in the country, which may lead to further interest rate hikes by the Central Bank of Nigeria and an extension increased cost of borrowing for businesses and individuals. Where does this leave Nigeria? 20.1 trillion naira in 1 year by the Tinubu administration. And they say would continue the inflationary trend, and indirectly the central bank is going to keep increasing interest rates. Are we heading towards the right direction?
Now, the first question is, why is every government that comes in wants to run its government with loan? Yes, I know all over the world, even in the United States of America, no country that does not borrow money. But our own is becoming too much. It's becoming too much simply because our leaders have not taken their time to sit down and have a strategic roadmap on how to, ensure a productive governance. What do I mean by a productive governance? Instead of relying on this borrowing from foreign aid, borrowing from local investors, borrowing from this 20 trillion, why don't we devise the mechanisms for internal generated revenue, which in most cases you can achieve it through production. If you can empower your production workforce, of course, you're already creating opportunities for your FX to grow, because you're going to have more goods produced in the country and you're going to earn foreign exchange by exporting. So the question is, all this money being borrowed by the government so far, how much of this money has been put into use in the aspect of manufacturing, in the aspect of production, so that they can address the problem for a long term? But when you borrow the money to pay when you borrow the money to pay wages, to borrow the money to pay salary, borrow the money
to debt servicing.
Debt servicing, of course, you already included the inflation and already putting a lot of pressures on the economies. I don't think it's the way forward.
Doesn't that tell us how probably unprepared the government is all they wanted is just to win the elections, but they're not prepared on how to tackle the economic challenges bedeviling the country?
Yeah, the government, when they are coming in power, when they are campaigning for their various positions, they actually make a lot of manifestos, a lot of promises to the people to actually maybe gain their votes. But beyond your manifesto, we want concrete actions, and these concrete actions must be driven by a political way to do so. Now, the government, the Tinubu-led administration came and they started with, reshuffling the system, creating new appointments and bringing more professionals involved. We expect that on the long term, these professionals that he has onboarded as his members of his cabinets and representing different sectors and parastatals, they should be able to be the one to sit down with the president, have a closed-door conversation. We have professionals who can actually lead. Do you think
not to cut you short, but do you think his cabinet was based on merit or based on trying to make the boys or his team that supported him during the elections happy? Because there was this talk about boys from the Lagos getting appointment rather than true technocrats who had something to offer the country. Rather, the appointments were based to satisfy certain regions and certain personality and groups and associations who he felt supported his ambition to become the president.
Yeah, of course, we see this type of criticisms all over the time.
But hasn't results shown that that's what we're seeing?
Yeah, well, of course, even though we might see that maybe the sum of political appointments made by the Mr. President maybe perhaps have favored some people more than the other, of course, but I think on a progressive note, we shouldn't actually focus on which tribe has received the appointment or the other. We should look at the performance. If the people that the president feel that they can actually serve and serve very well, we should have this principle.
Has the Cardoso-led government, CBN governor, have they delivered the goods for you?
Yeah, it's actually the central bank management. We can see their own performance. They have actually done some credible, achieved
By
some.
sacking 600 staff force of the CBN, by continuous hiking interest rate.
It's not a rocket science. The Cardoso-led Central Bank of Nigeria also has a lot of work to do. I think it's about 1 year, less than 1 year he has been appointed, and I believe he still has a lot of work to do. They have a lot of policies has been created at the Central Bank of Nigeria, which we will begin to see the impact on a long time. But I believe there are more gaps need to be filled.
All right, we hope that's, but it's worrisome because in the president's 1 year in office, we were told that ministers had submitted their first quarter reports of their performance. Hadiza Bala, we expected her to make it public what the scorecard of each of the 47 ministers were, but we did not see that. Is that to say that the performance of the ministers were below par? That was why the government wasn't proud enough to make it public.
Well, governance is about accountability and transparency. Democracy is the leadership of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Have we seen that?
So I don't see any reason why that scorecard shouldn't be made public, because the first point of recovering this nation is to put in the right people in leadership positions. And the only way you can do that is when you are able to evaluate the performances of the people that are entrusted with one position or the other. So if they are not doing well, they can be changed. So we should be transparent on how we run the country. We shouldn't use because of interest or because this mentality of winners take it all. Yeah. Right. So I really thought that if the government are trying to play games with kind of releasing or making it public this scorecards of the performance of these 47 ministers, I think is something that is questionable, and that position must be reversed as a matter of urgency.
All right, let's wrap our conversation and take into Edo State, where it's been said that the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, on Sunday expressed satisfaction with the ongoing continuous voter registration in Ondo State. Yakubu, who was in the state to assess the exercise, told journalists as of Saturday that the commission had registered 20,000 fresh Ondo voters ahead of the November 16 governorship election in the state. INEC commenced the CVR last Monday, May 27, 2024, at various designated centers across the 18 local government areas of the state. And according to the commission, the collection of both the CVR and the permanent voter card will end June 5th, 2024. Lots of issues in terms of this continuous voters registration, where in Edo State it was, INEC was told to stop the process because torrential rains did destroy some equipment, essential materials in some of their offices in the Edo State, but INEC continued. Are you impressed with how far INEC has gone in terms of the continuous voters registration, especially Ondo now, where 20 new voters have registered? Does that give us an inkling towards how desperate probably the electors are ready to vote out certain people and probably voting new government?
Sure, it's kind of commendable, because what played out during the 2023 presidential election, where we see massive, young people, massive youths coming out to, declare their position or to vote to their rightful candidates during the presidential election and the governorship election and other leadership election offices. I think what we see in Ondo State right now is actually very commendable, because in the future of Nigeria will be dependent on how much people are willing to participate in electoral processes, because it is not enough to complain that the leaders are not doing the right thing, because at the end of the day, it is the people who put the leaders there. So if they feel that the people are not doing the right thing, it is still the people that are going to remove them from that position. So we should encourage INEC with the work they are doing, at least getting more people to onboard onto the platform, electoral platform, because on the long term, these people are going to vote their right candidate, the people that they feel. And of course, with the way Nigeria is going now, everybody, I think we are beginning to reach a point where we can now say we are now having a sense of purpose. Everybody is now having a sense of purpose. How do we want to get it right in Nigeria? So, and the only way we can get it right is through our democratic system, through our electoral system. So if you and I believe that a certain politician is not doing the right thing, is not doing well, the only way we can say enough is enough is through our voters card. So if the INEC at this moment is actually doing that job, and then we need to encourage them. We need to encourage them.
All right, on the final note for Labour, what will be your watchword for the organized Labour and the federal government?
The federal government, I advise federal government to look at the consequences of this industrial action undertaken by the organized labor.
But do you think it affects the government directly, since they've got power and other things in
But there's no government without the people. So government should know that these things is going, if this strike is allowed to escalate, it's going to cause more harm to the economy and to the livelihood of the people of Nigeria. So I advise that the government should be able to call labor to order, look at various ways they can harmonize and come to a common terms so that this strike will be ended and people go back to their normal livelihood and their businesses.
All right, that's how we're going to call it a wrap on today's edition. I want to say a big thank you to Farouk Akaolisa. Always a pleasure having you in the studios as we look at trending issues.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
All right.
Mr. Tony, thanks for having me.
All right, so that's how we call the most compelling talk show on TV, The Desk, a wrap on today's edition. My name is Anthony Momodu, saying thank you for joining me on today's edition of the program, The Desk. And hopefully, we'll be talking about some of the trending stories tomorrow in the new edition, as we hope that the NLC, the TUC, and the federal government will be able to reach a truce that will be beneficial to the Nigerian workers and their families so that we can get our national life back on track. Good evening.